Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to implement the rest of the view, and we'll also take a peek and see how we can use these things called MVC commands to kind of help us out. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear house a little bit, clearing or getting rid of some of the tabs, collapsing some of these folders here just so that we're a little bit more clean. Now that I've taken care of that, the first thing we're going to do is head over to the init.jsp. That'll be found in source main resources, meta-inf resources. This is where we find the init.jsp. So this is given to us by default, and Liferay convention is to put all of the various tag libraries and other libraries that we may use here within the init.jsp. And the other JSPs will then reference the init.jsp, so that way each of our files don't need to reference 100 libraries or something like that. So init.jsp is the file that contains all of our libraries and dependencies, and then we refer to the init.jsp and the other JSPs. So head over to your exercises. I'll head over to mine. We are now implement the main view. I'll go ahead and copy, and then we will paste everything here. So we'll get rid of it and then add the new one here and then save along the way. You'll notice that there's an error in the MVC commands. That's okay. This is something that we're going to be creating a little bit later. So no worries with this error. We'll eventually resolve it. So you'll see a number of various dependencies that we'll be using, various tag libraries, and so on. Next, let's head over to the view.jsp. Here within the view.jsp, let's head back over to our materials. We'll go ahead and copy the snippets, highlight everything, and then we'll replace it with a snippet. Again, there are a couple of JSPs that we need to create along the way. Let's go ahead and highlight some of the key aspects of this snippet of code here with the view.jsp. You'll see that we're using Clay. Again, this is one of the tag libraries that we at Liferay have developed for the UI. We're using Clay to help create this management toolbar for us, helping us keep track of the various assignments and also kind of playing a small role in the way that they're going to be displayed. The real player that's helping us display the assignments that we'll eventually be creating is going to be this Liferay UI search container. Again, traditionally, without any sort of styling, the search container typically showed up as kind of like a table, right? And then we would define each of the columns within the table and then define what each row of this table is going to be. So in this situation, each row of this search container or this table as it typically appears is going to be containing assignments. We're also going to be including this JSP that we'll need to eventually create. And then we're going to have a way in which we can iterate or page through our assignments. So we're going to be using both the Liferay UI tag library as well as Clay to help us implement the view portion of our application. So we need a couple more JSPs. So we're going to tuck away our JSPs in a folder called assignment. So meta-inf resources, go ahead and right click the resources folder, heading over to new, followed by folder to create another folder. The name of this folder will be called assignment. Go ahead and click finish. We'll right click the assignment folder, head over to new. We're going to create a new file. So the name of this file will be the entry_search_columns. Columns is plural, so there's more than one. And then JSPF. We'll talk about the JSP fragment suffix a little bit later. So we'll go ahead and click finish. And then heading over to our materials, let's go ahead and grab the chunk of code for the entry search columns.jsp. Once we have that snippet, let's head back over and paste over there. And we won't talk about everything line by line I just want to highlight some of the key concepts here within this JSPF. So first and foremost, up here at the top, we have this portlet render URL. Again, the render URL is used to invoke the render phase, which will then render something traditionally. And in this case as well, we're going to be rendering JSPs. We have a number of parameters within that render URL. The big ones that we want to discuss is going to be this MVC render command name, as well as the assignment ID. But line number 4 is really where the bulk of this is coming from. So the MVC render command name has a value. This value is being placed elsewhere in this class that's going to be called MVC command names. So the name is the specific parameter that we use in MVC commands, right? This is static. We're always going to be using this MVC render command name. The value is what we as developers have control over, right? To make things easier, we're abstracting out the value here into its own class. So the value is what we're going to be looking for when we implement the MVC render command name. We'll connect the dots again in a little bit. And we're also going to be passing an assignment ID that's going to help us make sure we're rendering the proper assignment. All right, so all of that to say, we have a render URL. Its purpose is to render a specific JSP. Which JSP it's going to render will be determined once we create that MVC render command. So the render URL has this var, view assignment URL. Let's take a look and see where that is being invoked. Okay, so here it is, view assignment URL. Okay, just double checking to be sure. All right, so we're using the Liferay UI search container one more time. Okay, so this JSP, or this JSPF, I should say, is going to help us render each assignment in a single row. So rather than having a table, I'm going to keep things in one row. Okay, so this is what this JSPF is doing for us. The view assignment URL allows us to click into a specific assignment and take a look at the details of it. You'll notice that we still use Alloy UI here and there, but again, if it can be helped, try to use the other tag libraries like Liferay UI tag library and Clay. Okay, so this is our first JSP. Next JSP we're going to be implementing is the entry actions.jsp. Let's go ahead and create it. Right, entry underscore actions, so more than one action.jsp. So why are we creating this in the first place? It's part of the exercise, but where is that really taking effect? So within the search container, there's going to be a column. So within the search container, we're going to have a specific column that's going to display a JSP. That JSP is this entry actions.jsp. Let's go ahead and put the code in for that JSP, entry actions, and see what this is going to do for us. So entry actions, we'll paste the snippet here. Again, there's a lot going on. So again, we're not going to go line by line, but rather highlight some of the main ideas here within the JSP. I'll save along the way. So here within the entry actions.jsp, what we're doing is we're first going to be displaying an icon menu that's going to be coming from Lexicon. Again, one of the tag libraries that we use within the Liferay world. So what will happen is over in the entry search columns.jspf, it's going to display an icon. And that icon, once you click on it, will have a number of options for us. Those options are going to be here in line number 16, line number 27, and line number 36. So here we're going to have these three icons, right? The first two are kind of generic icons displaying a message. That message will be determined by us, with the delete icon having its own unique icon, right? You'll notice each one of these icons has a URL. So when you click the icon, it invokes the URL and we'll call this parameter here and each one of those parameters respectively. So using the view as the example, we'll see the view assignment URL is the var, or the sort of the name that corresponds with that render URL. So click on the icon, invokes the URL, which is actually a render URL. once that render URL is invoked, we're invoking the render phase and passing a number of parameters. Again, using MVC commands, right, we're passing a specific value, and depending on how we create these MVC render commands will determine which render command is ultimately going to be called and which JSP is going to be rendered. So this icon here, for example, is edit. It will pass a different value when it invokes the render phase, and depending on how we wire the connections will then determine which JSP is going to be rendered at the end of it all. So all of that to say, one more time, right, using the entry search columns.jspf will display each one of our assignments in a single row, right? We're going to have an actions button that corresponds with a specific assignment. When we click on that actions button, which is this JSP here, it'll open up a menu for us, and that menu will have 3 icons. Each one of those icons will invoke some sort of MVC command. The first 2 will be MVC render commands, since these are render URLs. And then this bottom one here is going to be invoking an action URL. In Liferay, we implement that as an MVC action command. So we'll be doing the same thing. A specific name, in this case, will be passed. And depending on how we create our MVC action command, will determine what exactly is going to happen once we click on this icon. Again, there's a lot of pieces we're going to need to connect over time, but let's focus on implementing these JSPs first. We have one more JSP to go. Let's go ahead and implement that one. So right-clicking the assignments folder one more time. Let's head over to New, followed by File, and this will be the view assignment.jsp. Heading back over to my exercises here, we'll go ahead and copy the view assignment.jsp, pasting that over, and then hitting save. So the view underscore assignment.jsp is just going to be displaying some of the basic information of the assignment. So this will be rendered later on. So the other 2 pieces connect with one another, while the view assignment.jsp don't quite connect with those 2, but let's see if we can find where exactly it is. So it'll probably show up a little bit later. It's not looking like I can find it right now. There's the entry actions.jsp right here. We're going to be rendering an assignment card, and that card itself will then have that options button. Once we click on the options button, that'll be the menu that shows up. We'll see that in action pretty soon. So by default, the search container would have its own column. We define that there. And then we're using Clay, assuming that the card view is enabled to be able to display the card with the options button. If the card view is not made available to us, then we have a default view to kind of go back on. So we've implemented the JSPs here. We need to create some MVC render commands in order to actually render those JSPs. But let's go ahead and see that in the next video. So until then, I'll see you in that next video.